Ooh, welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time for another Mock Draft Monday. Last Monday, I released my 1.0 mock draft. Those are my bigger mock drafts. I have a write-up up on the website, www.theFFforge.com, where you can see some of my reasoning behind and an explanation maybe about a little bit about the players themselves for each pick of the first round up on the website on my 1.0 mock draft write-up. And then I did a video for the second round where I talked about each of the second round picks in a similar style. These normal mock draft Monday videos, they're not a 1.0, 2.0, a little bit more relaxed of a thing, might be purposefully looking to see if some sort of chaotic scenario occurred, what might happen. Another thing for these mocks at this point in time, we're still quite early on in the process. The combine is going to be starting tomorrow. Throughout this week is when the combine goes, so there will be some risers and fallers from that. And then, of course, we are expecting, there to be probably a couple of trades, but free agency is yet to happen too, and that's going to have a big impact, especially on the first day, 2 days of the draft, where teams might be going, because best player available just really depends on the board. Probably just going to hard cut here, probably rambled on that a little bit too long. Let's get to this Monday's mock draft, and there are some things that, because free agency hasn't happened, and because there is such a quarterback carousel that could happen, we do need to clean up. As far as Kirk Cousins, I think I'm just going to leave him with the Vikings for now for this draft, and I'm not going to put Russell Wilson anywhere. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody, but we do need to, of course, make a trade that is apparently throughout in Indianapolis this week. There will be some discussions between a few teams and the Chicago Bears, and the odds-on favorite for Justin Fields has been Pittsburgh as of late. So that is the route I'm going to go for now. Could it be a future second and a current fourth-round pick, possibly 2 third-round picks? Possibly. I'm going to go with the just a single second-round pick, especially here we're doing one round in this mock draft. So I think that's the most likely, kind of where we're sitting in the value bubble of what the Bears should be expecting to get for Justin Fields. So we will just get that trade done with. Once again, that's not going to have an impact on this draft. And with the first-round pick, I do want to touch on some of the baselines of some of these, because I'm not going to be sitting here explaining why the Chicago Bears are going to take Caleb Williams with the first pick every single mock draft. But I don't think I've really talked about the reasoning for it. So, a month and a half ago, whatever it was, the last time that the Chicago Bears had a full staff intact before they hired new staff and fired old staff, I did think that it was very possible for them to want to accept a trade back, acquire a bunch of capital, future capital, this year capital, and go for it and give this coaching staff and Justin Fields one last year to prove it. I thought that was a possibility. That's just not the path. As soon as they fired Luke Getsy and the rest of the offensive staff, it became very clear that they're going to be moving on from Justin Fields, as we have done in this mock draft. And to me, as far as the quarterback decision goes, you've got Caleb Williams and Drake May, I think, in their own tier. And I do think Caleb Williams, not even a 1A, 1B situation, I do think it's going to be pretty clearly Caleb Williams getting taken with the first pick of this draft. And then, of course, you've got Jaden Daniels there as well. I don't think he's in this conversation. So for me, it really just, it's pretty clear for Chicago, probably Caleb Williams. Possibly Drake May. I would understand that some teams might have, some scouts, evaluators, would put Drake May ahead of Caleb Williams. That's very possible. But I will say, if the reasoning behind that has to do with character concerns for Caleb Williams, I think that's a bunch of hoo-ha, whatever. It doesn't make... Whereas Caleb Williams in all this drama, he has not been a part of it. It's just been people reporting on things, speculating on things that surround Caleb Williams, but none of it has come directly from Caleb Williams. So I personally, from what I can see, from what I can tell, reading through the tea leaves, taking the opinions of a few people who I respect, who aren't part of the sensationalist media, there's no concerns about anything with Caleb Williams and character issues. So that also not a concern. Now we go up to Washington on the clock next at pick number 2, And to me, also, almost always going to go Drake May here unless I'm trying to get funky with the draft. Very clearly, the QB2 for me in this draft. A very high-end prospect quarterback could be QB1 in, I don't know about, I would say, at least in the conversation in pretty much every year's draft outside of a year like this or Trevor Lawrence, where I would actually be thinking about it. Like last year's draft, I think Drake May probably goes ahead of both of those two. And if I'm Washington, zero chance that I am walking away from here without my future quarterback, second pick of the draft, with Drake May sitting there, a really, really good prospect. So that's how I feel about it. I don't feel a whole lot different about New England with this third pick. My baseline currently is Jayden Daniels, but there are a lot of red flags surrounding that, and maybe we're moving away from that being the baseline is what I'm saying. And for now, that is still my baseline, so I do want to explore something a little bit different with this draft, something that I haven't done before. Maybe once in just toying around before bedtime kind of mock draft where I toy around with scenarios at those points in time. I'm going to go with Marvin Harrison Jr. instead of Jayden Daniels for New England. My opinion from the beginning here, as far as soon as Jayden Daniels entered the conversation at the top of the draft, has been that if you believe that Jayden Daniels is a top 15 pick or something like that, and you're New England, the one that's believing that, you take him here. You don't get fancy. You don't try to trade out of here and still get him at pick 7 because, he's our 15th best player, so we can just fall back to pick 7. I think somebody would, if somebody else has the same feelings, they would be willing to jump you at that point in time. So you just take the quarterback, even if you think you're paying up a little bit too much for him at pick 3. But if he's not a clear first-round draft graded quarterback for you, if you are concerned about him where you'd second round draft grade is kind of more where you've got him, don't take him here. Either trade back out of this spot, something else I've explored, which is always fun. You can get quite the haul here probably if somebody's looking for a quarterback especially, or sit here and take Marvin Harrison Jr. Why not? So for here, like I said, doing low trades in this mock draft, we're just going to keep Marvin Harrison Jr. going to New England. Trade back would probably be a little bit of a smarter decision to go. And then Arizona, if Marvin Harrison Jr. if somebody trades up for him, or if New England takes him here ahead of you, I'm not too concerned about it. I would have liked to get Marvin Harrison Jr., but I'll tell you what, Malik Neighbors, really a great prospect. I understand why people would have him higher on their boards as far as the ceiling goes, which a lot of teams do draft based on more so the ceiling than the floor is a little bit more important. The potential of guys. Malik Neighbors does have a higher ceiling than Marvin Harrison Jr. His ceiling is equitable to one of the best modern wide receivers to have ever played in Antonio Brown. That's what you might be able to get from Malik Neighbors. So that's great. He does have a little bit of a higher chance of busting than Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr. gives you a really safe baseline and still a very high ceiling as well. So that's the thing, and that's where I think, because Marvin Harrison Jr. also comes in as a semi-generational to generational, really, wide receiver prospect. And then you got Malik Neighbors not too far behind. If I'm Arizona here, I'm taking Malik Neighbors, and I'm not too upset about anything and how it worked out. I'm not looking to trade out of this necessarily because of the fact if I was willing to take MHJ, I'm willing to take MN, Malik Neighbors. Those aren't nicknames. So that's how we're going to start this draft out, a little bit different than a lot of my drafts might look like. And immediately we are going to have a trade here at pick 5. Very often, Los Angeles Chargers is a team that I mock trading. And we're going to have Atlanta in this scenario coming up. They're going to give up picks 74, 79. This is like the dream trade up for the Los Angeles Chargers, getting a little bit more of this high-end capital, in my opinion. But also, Atlanta has this Jacksonville pick because of currently, I guess, not expecting. Jacksonville has not re-signed Calvin Ridley yet. So If they were to, then it would be a second round pick that Atlanta would have. Maybe they give that up. Basically, they're going to give up in some form or another this extra capital that they get for Calvin Ridley's, the trade of Calvin Ridley, and then use that to move up here for their future quarterback of the franchise. In this case, going to be Jaden Daniels. Giants come up onto the board. If you watched my original mock draft that I did, where I was looking over scenarios, I don't remember where I went. I might have gone to tackle at that time. I've decided against that. First of all, they really do need interior offensive line guard more so than a tackle. Getting a tackle starts to muck things up. This is a deep draft on the offensive line, so I could see teams saying, hey, you know what? We'll go in the second round and get our offensive lineman. We'll go in the third round and get our offensive lineman, because the drop-off between the position that we're looking at right here and what we could get at that position, at wide receiver, for instance, in the late second round compared to what we could get wide receiver right now is massive compared to the drop-off between the tackles. Like, we still really like the tackles that we're going to expect to be seen there at the late second round, something like that. Well, here for the New York Giants, that's kind of the argument, I think, for taking Rome Odunze. That and the fact that, obviously wide receiver is just as much of a need for them as any other position. And specifically, the type of wide receiver that Rome Odunze is I think what they need in that wide receiver room. So such a great match. I think that's the route that they go, most likely for me. And so that makes things a little bit easier with Tennessee. Wide receivers are off the board, at least the wide receivers that make sense to be drafting at this point in time. I do think Tennessee, definitely a team that could decide to trade out of this if they can continue to stay somewhere around the top 14 or so. I don't think you want to trade too far back in this draft. There's some really good talent up here, and you would have no problem taking Joe Alt. I know Tennessee fans, you're going to see that a lot, and here's why. Defensive back would be a cornerback. Is definitely something that you're thinking about taking if you're Tennessee here. And with the deep offensive line class, maybe you convince yourself to do that with the argument that I just kind of talked about. But for me, Joe Alt, I have on my big board ahead of these cornerbacks. So that is why most of the time I'm going to end up going Joe Alt here. It just came down to, I think that the need is somewhat similar. Obviously, offensive line really, really needs help. Same with the secondary, really, really needs help. So either way, whoever's higher up on their big board, I think, is who they would go between those two positions, assuming that those wide receivers are gone. Otherwise, that makes things a little bit more complex for them, or maybe it makes a team want to jump up and they can pull back and still get one of those positions anyways. Who knows? Now, the Chargers come up onto the board, pick 8. They, remember, just traded back a little ways, and to me, it makes sense for the Chargers currently to go cornerback because there is a drop-off in the talent level that I think you're not going to find, and you don't have like the wide receivers, the other equitable need. So to me, if you can't go wide receiver, you go cornerback here is basically what it is for the Chargers. They could, of course, go Brock Bowers as well. A versatile weapon for their offense would make sense. For a lot of reasons, but also doesn't make sense maybe as much as some people want to draw a tight line between Jim Harbaugh and tight ends and Brock Bowers. But the thing about Brock Bowers is he is not a traditional tight end. Jim Harbaugh strikes me as more of somebody who would want a traditional, he likes tight ends and he likes tight ends. Brock Bowers isn't necessarily in the same mold of tight end as 99.9% of tight ends. So I don't know that that's the best argument for it. But also, once again, there'd be plenty of reasons to bring in Brock Bowers, but I tend to lean cornerback here just because of the drop-off in talent by the next time that they'll be on the board, most likely. Then the Chicago Bears come up on the clock at pick 9, and this is something that I do not normally do for them, out of my norm. Typically here, if one of those wide receivers is still available, definitely going that route for Chicago. I think that's that's the best case scenario, I think, for their draft, but also not incredibly likely. An edge rusher, very much like Laiatu Latu would be, my number 1 pick for them. Jared Verse, I think one of those two would make a lot of sense. Cornerback could make sense, but also like I said, not a route that I liked at first. I'm like, it doesn't make sense. But I just talked about how Brock Bowers isn't necessarily your traditional tight end. He's a flex tight end. You're going to be putting him in your slot spot, a lot, most likely. You're probably going to be creating an offense that features him in some form or another. He's not just going to be a tight end on your team. And that's where this makes sense for Chicago, because they need receiving weapons. Like I said, best case scenario is one of those wide receivers dropping. Well, maybe we're not too far off with Brock Bowers dropping either. He's your tight end too. You can be out there in a 2 tight end set plenty. Essentially, he's your slot wide receiver, your tight end that you motion out there all the time. He's going to be rocking this from the slot most of the time, and he's an additional weapon. So to me, that actually does make a lot of sense for Chicago. Go best player available, Brock Bowers at this point in the draft. Could make sense as long as they believe in Brock Bowers and as long as the offensive staff wants to work with Brock Bowers. That's going to be one thing possibly working against Brock Bowers. Some offensive coordinators might just say, he just doesn't fit my system. I don't know what to do with him, etc. That's possible. And that's going to bring us up to the 10th pick of the draft. And actually, before we finish up the top 10, why don't we right now just hear a quick word from our sponsor.
Me, Steve of the Fantasy Football Forge. I wanted to make you aware of some of the benefits that you can receive by becoming a supporting member of the channel for the low price of 99 cents. Upon becoming a channel member, you will receive a link to a Discord channel where you can communicate with the community on whole. And at this time of draft season, you will also receive access to a bunch of extra benefits. Number 1. Write-ups for each player I've scouted at each position, some of their strengths, their weaknesses, and extra notes that I wrote about each of them. Number 2, my positional draft board with players in order of their draft grade via round, first round, second round, second/third round draft grade, etc. Number 3, my top 50 big board. Thank you very much for any and all of your support. And now back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Wow, what a great video that was from our sponsor. Now it's time for pick 10 through the rest of the draft. No more sponsors to go through. It's pure draft talk from here on out. And also, please don't forget to drop a like, make a comment. You know how YouTube works. Do those things. Subscribe, hit the bell, whatever. It all really, really, really does help the channel a lot, and it's so much appreciated. So, let's see a trade. You can see I'm in the trade window here. I think the New York Jets here at pick 10 would really like to trade out. They don't have that second round pick of theirs. I think they'd really like to get a top end receiver and offensive lineman. And if you have to sacrifice a little bit off of how good of a quality of one of those positions that you get, then I think you're okay with that if you can move back a little ways in this draft. So here, I do have them moving back with Las Vegas. Where are you? The Raiders just making a little bit of hop over some of these teams who might be looking for a quarterback, possibly. Moving up to pick 10, and how does this trade work out? So we're going to give up pick 44, and we're going to get the 72nd pick from the Jets. So just small move up, but for the Jets, they're going to get to move from the third round into the second round, like I talked about. I think they would like to have a first and a second round pick in this draft, one way or another. So this trade works out, I think, very nicely for the New York Jets, and they're basically still going to get who they want here at pick 13, who they might have taken here at pick 10. Very possible. So let's see, pick 10. Yeah, of course, we're moving up for a reason here. It's going to be J.J. McCarthy. I'm sorry, Las Vegas fans, or at least 90% of Las Vegas Raiders fans, because about 90% of everybody hates J.J. McCarthy as far as the public goes, but we're trying to predict what might happen in the NFL draft, and currently the rumor is J.J. McCarthy, top 10, top 12, from a very, very verifiable, source who's linked in to the crowd, to the NFL elite, the execs, and the people talking. So, a lot of you get a lot of what am I trying to think of? Fake news that comes out this, not necessarily this time of the year, but throughout the entirety of the draft season, especially as we get closer to the draft. You think somebody like Hendon Hooker last year. So I do keep my ears peeled for things that I don't think are possible, but I do think that this is possible because J.J. McCarthy is my QB4. I do see some of the great things in him. Hendon Hooker, I didn't fall for that first round crap last year. It's like, there's just no way with the injury, the age, and everything, and the talent and the offense that he had run, the question marks between that and moving into a more traditional offense for the NFL, like, he was not ever going to get drafted in the first round. I think that it's very possible J.J. McCarthy could get drafted in the first round. We will see if these rumors back off or not, but for now, we're going to follow that rumor mill, taking him in the top 10 here to the Las Vegas Raiders. And I wouldn't be upset about it if I was a Raiders fan, but I'm not a Raiders fan, so I don't have to actually think of how that would feel if my team were to take it. But don't worry, this is not the real draft, so calm down. Don't get too angry about it. Don't turn off the draft. A lot more to go, unless, of course, you're a Las Vegas Raiders fan. Then maybe you just turn off the draft because you've seen it all and don't have you trade back into the first round either. Now, the Minnesota Vikings are up on the board next at pick 11, and we're going to go edge here. Once again, talked about Laiatu Latu is my number 1 edge rusher, Dallas Turner, number 2, Jared Verse 3. But I think the best fit here for the Vikings, that they're the first team to take an edge rusher out the board or whatever, Dallas Turner fits them very nicely. And the Vikings most likely will need an edge rusher. Their 3 top edge rushers from last season are all currently free agents, so we'll see what they do with that. But, you got to think there's a very high likelihood that they'll be looking to edge. So I either have them go edge or cornerback here pretty much all the time. Of course, they might be in the quarterback sweepstakes as well, so that will change things up. But currently my baseline is edge, cornerback, thinking that Kirk Cousins returns to Minnesota. But I got to think that if Atlanta's interested in Kirk Cousins, that maybe that'll be a little bit more enticing for Kirk to go that route. I don't know. I don't know how he feels about the Vikings organization, the friendships that he has there, etc. So we'll see. Now, the Broncos are up at pick 12. This is a team who you're not going to see me really having move up because I just think that spells disaster for the organization. I don't think that they've put all of their resources and capital. They don't have a whole lot of capital and resources right now to work with for Sean Payton. Sean Payton has been, brought in here to, I don't think like super long term, bring this thing down to the studs and rebuild the team. He came here because he thought that they had something to work with, a framework that he could work with, and that quickly crumbled. So to me, to take a bunch of your assets, move up for one of the quarterbacks, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially if you think Bo Nix might make it to you here at pick 12. You just sit here, and if you think he could go later, you even maybe trade down. But ultimately, you don't want to take too many risks because I do think Bo Nix probably makes a lot of sense for where this organization is at, for the offensive system that Sean Payton runs and what he asks of his quarterbacks. So to me, it just makes a whole lot of sense. Anyways, you grab Bo Nix, you got a guy who's pretty NFL ready, as much as you can predict for any kind of rookie quarterback. Well, not as much as, but he's up there. You're going to feel comfortable throwing him out there week 1, I think, for Bo Nix, and see what you got in him. Make life as easy as you can on him early on, of course. But in this situation, you don't spend any more capital to get up here. First round picks fail all the time just because you're reaching potentially a little bit on this quarterback value. Not a big deal. Quarterbacks are very important and the lifeblood of a team. You need it. And so Broncos, you take Bo Nix, no risks, even if you think he's more of a second round guy. I just think that you just take the quarterback here because they don't have a second round pick currently. Now, pick 13, the New York Jets are back up onto the board, and the rumor is that there's ties between Talifuanga and the New York Jets. So that is the route that we're going to go here, continue to follow some of the rumor mill, the rumors that have some teeth, some grit to them, and that one does. So it makes plenty of sense. I'm going to go that route instead of Olu. Olu is who I would give them if there was no tie-ins between Tally and the New York Jets. But, New Orleans Saints are fine with that because they need a left tackle. Now, I know some New Orleans fans say, we don't need a tackle. Ryan Ramczyk is returning now. Well, I guess if you want Trevor Penning, is it Penning? A tackle, that's your next guy up currently. Now, we'll see what happens in free agency, but otherwise, you still need some help along that offensive line, specifically left tackle. So, Olu, a great addition to the team here at pick 14. I think you should be very happy with that, New Orleans Saints fans, although I know some of you might not be. Don't worry, you're going to get some other positions here at different times in the draft. Still a lot of picks to go. Pick 15, we've got the Indianapolis Colts up on the board, and in this scenario, this is one of the picks where we're going to go away, not my typical pick. I don't know if I've ever done this. We're going to go Byron Murphy, and this is under the understanding that Grover Stewart does not get re-signed, so Indianapolis has a hole there along the internal of their defensive line, and Byron Murphy is, the best guy for the job, so you just go that route. Other routes you could go, of course, cornerbacks can be very, very common here. Offensive line is a possibility, depending on what happens in free agency. Wide receiver could be definitely a possibility as well for Indianapolis. But at the end of the day, we're just going to go with this route for this draft to explore how that could make other impacts and just see a different route, a possibility for the draft. And we've got the Seattle Seahawks, not too creative here. Going to go edge rusher with Laiatu Latu, my number one edge rusher. One of the big needs that they have. They could go center, Jackson Powers Johnson here, but I do have edge rusher as a bigger need, I think, on my needs board. And as far as guard go, we can get one, I think, third round. I don't believe they have a second round pick. So let's get a top edge rusher here, help our defense out a little bit more with Laiatu Latu. Then we got the Jacksonville Jaguars up on the clock next. Once again, I don't think this is very creative at this point in time. JPJ going to Jacksonville makes a lot of sense, and I believe I have him higher up on my big board, my top 50, than the current wide receivers that are available. Wide receiver could be a route to go in this scenario. This is one thing, though, for me, if I'm Jacksonville, and I'm looking at how I expect the board to fall, I'm saying I'm probably willing to re-sign Calvin Ridley, expecting Calvin Johnson. Could you imagine? Expecting Jackson Powers Johnson to very possibly be here. Now, you're taking a bit of a gamble, of course, doing that. You don't want to just straight up one for one it, but just thinking of some of the positions of need that you have, and what the first round talent looks like. You're a pick away from a Latu here, possibly otherwise. Another addition that I'd happily bring in. I think losing out on the second round pick, yes, that sucks. But either way, you're losing a day 2 pick. You're losing a day 3 pick. You're losing a third round pick or a second round pick. So it's not like you're just straight up, if we sign Calvin Ridley, we're losing a second round pick. That's not how it goes. If you sign Calvin Ridley, instead of losing a third round pick, you're losing a second round pick. And that's going to bring up pick 18 of this mock draft with Cincinnati up on the clock next. Nothing too original here. Here is a baseline pick. Going to go with J.C. Latham. I almost want to call him C.J. Latham. J.C. Latham here, tackle, very much a need. If Byron Murphy's available and they have not signed DJ Reader back to the team, that could be very much a possibility. If Brock Bowers is still available, that could be a possibility. They're bringing T. Higgins back, so I think wide receivers probably not very likely here. I think they'll be okay with that for one more year, and they already did draft planning ahead last year, grabbing Josephus and Charlie. I can't remember his last name, but your slot guy who's going to be getting an opportunity this year, I think. So for me, you just went through a season without your starting quarterback. You don't want to do that again. Get some extra protection in there for him. J.C. Latham, makes a lot of sense. And also, I do actually have Amarius Mims ranked higher on my big board than J.C. Latham. However, for me, if I'm Cincinnati, Amarius Mims, bit of a project, higher floor, lower ceiling, higher ceiling, lower floor kind of pick, more boom bust. And I just want the sure thing, and I want the sure thing now. My window is now. My window doesn't start next year. We're in the middle of it, so just give me the better current offensive tackle in J.C. Latham. Get him out there. That's how I view that. Then the Los Angeles Rams come up at pick 19. A lot of different routes that they could go. but I do have secondary as like their biggest need. And to me, Cooper DeJean is normally where I go. But Terrion Arnold is another defensive back who does bring that versatile element to the field that the Los Angeles Rams might like. And maybe they have Terrion Arnold ranked ahead of Cooper DeJean. Very, very possible. And so in that event, we take Terrion Arnold here. So that's just one of those things where I'm going a little bit different in this mock draft than I normally do, but a similar idea for that pick for the Los Angeles Rams. Then the Pittsburgh Steelers come up onto the clock next, and with Jackson Powers-Johnson already taken, they would have loved that pick. Guard, we'll figure it out. But they do need another cornerback. And I think that if Nate Wiggins is here, they would be very happy to take Nate Wiggins. Maybe they're okay trading back a little ways in this draft if they're not in love with a guy like Nate Wiggins. But if they are, it makes a lot of sense for them. It's going to give them some versatility in the cornerback room. Then we've got the Miami Dolphins coming up at pick 21. Not really looking. We're looking offensive line here for sure. Once again, tight end would have been great, but Brock Bowers is gone. Might be okay trading up for Brock Bowers if he's still available here past pick 14, but definitely not trying to spend too much capital moving up, as Miami Dolphins have been a little bit capital starved as of late, and they're a team who needs to bring in young, fresh, new talent because they're kind of up against things when it comes to the cap and their future of that whole situation there for them. So we're looking offensive line here. We need help there. I think could be looking like cornerback. There's some other areas that you could be looking. Edge rusher, because they're going to be short on that quite possibly due to injuries and whatnot, especially for the start of next season. So that would be another area we're looking. But here, not necessarily looking tackle. Also, we're kind of within our window here, like maybe even at the end of our window this season for the Miami Dolphins. Wide receiver is one that I often do like to mock to them to just kind of, go for it all. But Troy Fontenot could make some sense here for the interior offensive line. Graham Barton, though, I think ultimately I have them picking here. Not my common pick for them, but he could very much just be what they want. I would say if they're going Graham Barton, you're probably looking to move out of that 21 spot, have somebody move up there, get a little bit of extra draft capital by moving back to maybe somebody like Green Bay in this situation would be happy to come up for Cooper DeJean. Could make a lot of sense. But once again, low trade. But Graham Barton makes a lot of sense for Miami, their needs. Guard, center, has the ability to go out and play tackle. So maybe he's your future tackle, possibly, but we'll find that out in the future. But for now, you know exactly where he's going on the interior of that offensive line. Makes a lot of sense for them. Then the Philadelphia Eagles come up at pick 22. And here I'm going to have them go Cooper DeJean. I know, Eagles fan, some of you, way more of you than I would. I don't know what it is about your local media that has convinced you guys that your secondary is fine, or the fact that people know the names and they have good Madden ratings means that your secondary is fine. But if you look at what happened last season, your secondary is not good. It just plain out was not good. Now, you have invested a little bit into that secondary, so I get that argument to an extent. But any of these guys in the first round here are going to be better than what you've invested in, no doubt. And so, Philly, you're in your window. You don't have a whole lot of holes. Let's get some good talent in on that secondary. I have you going Cooper DeJean in this instance. I don't know. Maybe Philly doesn't love Cooper DeJean. Maybe they view him as a safety, in which case I do think that your safety's fine. I don't think you need 10 guys in your secondary to bring in to recover this thing to get back to being a much better defense. But it was a down year. I want to bring in some help. If we like Cooper DeJean as a weapon or as a cornerback straight up, it would be a good addition into the secondary. So that's going to bring Houston up onto the clock next. Another team, some of you might not love this, I know. Edge rusher, Jared Verse. Look, Jared Verse is a guy who, if he goes in the top 10, you're not going to blink. You got him here at pick 23. It's great. You need more than one edge rusher. I know you've had J.J. Watt at one time in the past. Houston fan, you seem to think that one amazing edge rusher is enough. It's just not. And I know you currently in free agency, you only have one. In free agency, maybe you're going to be bringing back I can't think of his name right now. Still, that's 2. You still need help there. A great rushing attack front 7 has 3, 4 guys who can get to the quarterback, not 1 or 2. So we're going to grab Jared Verse here. Once again, free agency maybe dictates we don't necessarily, we want to go a different route. Maybe we want a wide receiver, but wide receiver is not necessarily a need either for you guys. Although, just like with Philadelphia, Miami, Dallas, for me, if you went wide receiver on these teams, I totally understand it and love it, but it's not like it's some sort of big need. So that brings us to Dallas, where, like I just said, wide receiver I think would be fun here. I think that makes some sense. I'm going to go with a pick that I really don't actually think is very likely, but also would fit like Dallas and what they like to do and fit some of their needs coming up into the future very, very well. Amarius Mims, high upside guy. You need some help along that offensive line soon and later, and Amarius Mims is an investment in the later. Why I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense for Dallas is that I do believe that Jerry Jones is going to be operating in the end of Dak Prescott's time with Dallas under the understanding of mortality. I think that he realizes that if he has to bring this down to the studs and totally rebuild again, it's very likely that he'll never really see a true opportunity to get to the Super Bowl again. And he thinks that he has that with this team. And I think that he's not wrong in thinking that. It just takes a little bit of not bad luck, and Dallas could make it to a Super Bowl with the defense that they have, with the offense, and how they can perform sometimes. So, you go on a run. It makes a lot of sense. To me, I could see Dallas adding a wide receiver here and just going for it all, giving no excuses basically to this offense and running this team kind of into the ground to where in another 2 years the rebuild is truly going to be just totally restarting everything out. Very possible. But in this scenario, we're going to go with Amarius Mims because that also makes a lot of sense. It just doesn't fit my theory of where Jerry Jones is. I think he is, well, at this point, the word would be desperate. So, Green Bay Packers up on the clock at pick 25. I don't think cornerback is a big need for the Packers. They don't have any massive needs. Well, they do have some. Safety. I think it's too early to go safety. But Kool-Aid McKinstry, if you can get him at pick 25, he's a really good, high-talented cornerback, and I do think that they would like a cornerback in this draft, 1 or 2, depending on exactly, especially where they get the first one. But, just looking at the board and everything, to me, I was like, wow, you could trade back a little ways, but also we'll just take the cornerback here. We've got a lot of draft capital over the first 3 rounds of this draft that you can work with to get some of those other positions and play the board. Jerzon Newton could make some sense here too, but I went with Kool-Aid McKinstry here for the Green Bay Packers. Cornerback, once again, just kind of best player available in it there. Then Tampa Bay comes up onto the board next. Another team who could definitely be looking to trade back from this spot, but they also have a bunch of needs, and one of those needs might be at wide receiver. So this is one of those fun picks. You're not going to see me pick wide receiver too often, at least prior to free agency for the Bucs, because I am expecting them to bring back Mike Evans. But Mike Evans, free agent, possibly could lose him. Even if they retain Mike Evans, they still might be looking for another wide receiver, but I don't know about first round with all the other needs that they have. In this situation, though, we're going to go Troy Franklin for them. He's next up on my wide receiver big board, so that's why I chose Troy Franklin, but it could be Brian Thomas Jr. or somebody else. But I like Troy Franklin a little bit more than Brian Thomas Jr. in some ways. In other ways, he scares me more than BTJ. Then the Arizona Cardinals coming up on the board at pick 27. And this is, once again, very much the baseline currently for me with Arizona at pick 27. I very often have Jerzon Newton still available, and I have interior defensive line as the biggest need for the Arizona Cardinals. So, and Jerzon Newton pretty high up on my big board. it just ends up making perfect sense. Wouldn't care, wouldn't mind if if they have like a high grade on a Troy Franklin or Brian Thomas Jr. if they were available here. I think that would be fun, even with Malik Neighbors, to add another receiver here in the first round. I won't be surprised if day two. By the end of day two, if they've taken 2 receivers, but they also have a lot of holes to plug. A guy like Kool-Aid, if he were to be available here, would make a lot of sense. Or if they like one of the other cornerbacks that's up here, it could make sense for them too. But I have a bigger need here at the internal, so it depends how they feel. But I think you need help with the pass rush. Jerzon Newton can help you there, and you need help on the internal defensive line. Jerzon Newton, that's where he plays. So Buffalo Bills up next at pick 28 of this draft, and just had him go next best player available here, wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. for big need. Of course, if Jerzon Newton were still available, definitely might be somebody that they would look at, or Byron Murphy. But linebacker is a possibility here. Same with the last several picks. Green Bay all the way down here. Like all these teams could use a linebacker. To me, the only linebacker that would be worth taking in the first round is Peyton Willis. And to me, I think is it Willis, right? He's not going to go in the first round though because of injury concerns, most likely. But if one of these teams decides that the medicals isn't as much of a concern for them or whatnot, this would be about the start of where you could take a guy like him. I don't think Edgerrin Cooper is a first round talent, so personally I wouldn't quite take him. I should say I don't have a first round grade on him myself, but it's close enough. So. Maybe one of these teams goes out to take a linebacker. Nonetheless, I chose Brian Thomas Jr. for Buffalo, despite absolutely loving Keon Coleman for him because I have a higher draft grade on Brian Thomas Jr., but they might not. Also, they might think like I do, and they might say, well, even though Brian Thomas Jr. is the higher graded player, specifically for the quarterback that we have, Josh Allen, I really like the idea of bringing Keon Coleman in. I think that he would be the best match up with Josh Allen, and his talents and their talents. It's a really good marriage. I like it a lot. So maybe they would feel the same, and then that would cause them to go Keon Coleman, even if they technically think Brian Thomas Jr. is the better wide receiver, if that makes sense. I think it could make sense sometimes, skill sets just align like that. So who knows? Up next, cornerback to the Lions. Of course, that's not a big surprise. Could also go anywhere along the defensive line. They also, much like Houston, could use a few more guys. And then Baltimore comes up on the clock next. For me, if I'm Baltimore and Adonai Mitchell is still on the board here, it's going to be very hard for me not to take him, help out this offense, help out this receiving core. I think he's a really, really great match for what they should be looking for myself. And so that's the marriage that I like here at pick 30 is Adonai to Baltimore. Definitely a pick that you'll probably see from me more, and I love that. San Francisco up next, 31st pick of the draft, and we're going to have them looking towards the offensive line, looking at cornerbacks. To me, there are a couple cornerbacks here. I have offensive line as a bigger need, and actually, I don't even think I have cornerback. What do I have here for their needs? I have edge rusher and linebacker as higher needs than I do cornerback. I think that they can get away with getting more of a depth cornerback or a project cornerback than necessarily having to get a guy that needs to start year one here for them. You would like to improve there for sure. So, just based on the cornerbacks that are currently available, I just don't think that they give you the enough upside to go for them instead of patching up this offensive line, which I have the guard be more important than tackle for them. And when you look at the edge rushers available, Chris Broswell could make sense. Chop Robinson is next up on my board, and as a first to second round grade talent on him. I just don't know that Chop Robinson fits what San Francisco is going to be looking for from an edge rusher. Darius Robinson, however, might fit what they would be looking for, so that's a very possible pick. But I'm going to have him going Troy Fautanu here as a guy who can help them for now at guard and possibly in the future at tackle. I still think that he does maybe profile a little bit better as a tackle actually than he does guard. I know I'm in the minority on that, but I know I'm also not the only one. So that's a little bit comforting. But as far as Troy Fautanu goes, regardless, this is one of those picks where a lot of people have him going in the first round. I don't have a first round grade on him, more like a second round grade on him. I might have moved that up to a first/second round grade on him. Last up with the draft, we got Kansas City hitting the board, and looking at the board here is Kansas City. We've got needs, right? But I copped out a little bit on this because all of those needs are, except for wide receiver, are very dependent upon what the free agency ends up looking like. I mean, you could go interior defensive line, but of course, if you bring Chris Jones back, that's less of a need. Could go offensive line. I think regardless, we're probably going to go that route early-ish on in the draft, but Donovan Smith is a free agent. Bring him back, then that's not as much of a need. Edge rusher, you got Mike Dana as a free agent. You bring him back, less of a need. Still something where you're looking at. Cornerback, you got L'Jarius Sneed hitting free agency. I'm sure they're going to be trying the hardest to bring him back, but if they don't bring him back, then cornerback's going to be a big need for them. Tight end, definitely something that we're looking towards the future with as a need. Linebacker, probably losing, could be losing Willie Gay. He's a free agent. You want, now you need some more help in that tight linebacker room. Really just depth there and develop, I think, though. Not looking for a top end linebacker because they have drafted pretty heavily at linebacker over the last several years since acquiring Willie Gay, really. So they continue to draft and develop in their linebacking core, but still somewhere where maybe they're going to have to continue to do that again if they lose Willie Gay. So Kansas City here on the board, looking at this, once again, wide receiver, the big need. I really don't love Keon Coleman. I don't like that. I don't think Patrick Mahomes is going to feel comfortable throwing to a guy who the ball could get picked as much as it could get caught with. He's not great at creating separation. I just don't like the matchup there a whole lot. And I think if the organization were to ask Patrick Mahomes, like, hey, should we get Keon Coleman here? He might say, in theory, it's a lot of fun, but I don't know that I'd trust throwing the ball up to that guy. And Ladd McConkey, another one where I think it depends on exactly how they evaluate him. How much do they like his ability to go north and south on the field, go deep? If he's just simply a slot guy, I think you've pretty much already got that in Rashee Rice. So it's a totally different. You could have both of them on the same team. But I think we're looking for somebody to help stretch the field here. We're looking for something better than MVS, but to replace MVS. And so that's where Jermaine Burton, I think even Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall make a little more sense. Xavier Worthy probably makes more sense than these two guys. And same with Devontae Walker. So second round, third round, I think we're going to be able to find somebody, or we could trade back. Either way, what I end up doing is I am trading back, because one of the things I wanted to do in this draft was get New England back up in here, trading in. And I kind of had forgotten about that, like up at 21, Miami here might have been a spot, but this ends up working really nicely for, we got to go to the trade, for New England. Coming up here, actually, it didn't have to be New England, but I wanted somebody to come back in here in the 20s to grab a final quarterback. Because I do think that's very possible that we could see all 6 of these quarterbacks go in the first round. So here is the draft here, the trade, pick 34 for pick 32. So at the end of the day, whoever Kansas City is thinking of drafting here, as long as it's not Ladd McConkey, or if they like a couple of those wide receivers equally, they're not losing anything by trading back to pick 34. So whoever they like, they're still going to be able to get. And for their troubles, for their kindness, they're going to move pick 133 up to pick 104. So a nice little move up there to move back and probably not lose out on anything in this scenario where New England comes up here to secure their quarterback in Michael Penix Jr. Once again, Carolina, I think Ladd McConkey would make a lot of sense there for them. Could go Keon Coleman, could go somebody else. Whoever is next up on their wide receiver board, for me, usually it's going to be Ladd McConkey to them. I like that fit a lot. So here is the final draft board. You can see all of the picks on the screen. Let me know any of your thoughts, what you liked, what you did not like. All of it. Once again, it all helps the algorithm too when you comment. So I hope you enjoyed this. Look forward to, there will definitely be more content surrounding the draft coming out here, but going to be a very busy week watching the combine, taking notes. I love watching the media sessions. That's my best interview period with these guys, and I learned a lot about them last year, and was able to make, I think, some very accurate assessments that helped me to push a couple of guys up on my board and maybe drop a few guys on my board. So yeah, busy week ahead. I hope you enjoyed the draft. Peace out.